Welcome to the English translation of Vom Betrieb bis ins Netz, Gewerkschaften als Vorbild für modernen Widerstand, from the company into the network, trade unions as a role model for modern resistance, by Joanna Stark and Laurent Kuffert, live from the 38th 3C. All talks at Congress are live translated between English and German and to one additional language. We appreciate your feedback. Please use the hashtag C3Lingo. Your translators for this talk are Sebelis and Molito.
Gewerkschaften ist ein toller Ort. Wir haben da zwei Leute.
So we are talking about ways of exerting resistance, and one at Congress a lot, and one of these areas would be in the works environment and would be about trade unions. And our speakers have grown from representing students at school to being trade union representatives. And please give them a warm welcome. Thank you. From the workplace to the net, trade unions as a role model for modern resistance, ? That is the title. We all have issues that move us, that engage us, and where we like to get things progress, make things progress. And in our example, that is trade union work, the fight for good work conditions, be it pay, times, anything legally connected. And in your case, it could be anything. For example, an activity for a better net connection, or an earth that you can still live in the future. And we're all connected by wanting to stand up for something. And by going that, we go through various emotions. At least that was our experience, which we have kind of transferred onto you. There might be terms of having no idea what to do, being thoughtful, what can I do? But then also hope, which comes from action. Action that moves things forward and creates awareness. This whole spectrum is what we want to go through with you today, using examples, not just examples that necessarily we have experienced. We've collected a few, and we hope that these examples are something that you can take with you and that can create some inspiration for you. Who are we? The names have already been mentioned, Joanna Stark and Laurent Kuffert. And since the last Leipzig Congress, strangely, I have now moved to Leipzig and the Congress has moved away, but I forgive the Congress that. I feel so well looked after here, so familiar here, and I love the exchanges that we can have. And when I saw this headline, I was really happy that this could be talked about. In my regular life, if I try to explain this to my family, I tell them that I do something with the internet, but I can actually reveal to you that I am responsible for part of the elections infrastructure in various companies that come to me. What was the network infrastructure? I am doing voluntary work for the trade union Verdi, currently in the youth section of it, which will soon change, but that's okay too. Otherwise, I like to travel, which you have to do if you do trade union work, because you are busy traveling around Germany or even Europe, because even internationally there are conferences in other countries. I once ended up in another country almost by mistake, but that's a different story. So much about me.
Danke und ja, jetzt erstmal ein paar
Yeah,
Sachen
thank
zu
you.
mir.
And now a few things about me.
Bei mir einer der ersten Sachen als
For me, one of the first things when I got into the IT industry, when I got my laptop, I was interested in important topics like privacy, data protection, all topics you can see on the Congress again.
ja, ziemlich genau 8 Jahren auch hier in Hamburg.
So I had been here in the 33C3 in Hamburg, and I wouldn't have thought that on a second Congress I would be standing on the stage, but it works out like that.
Auch Interesse an IT hatte, auch
I had interest in IT early, started with
Software-Tester, also mit Fokus auf die Automatisierung.
started studying computer science, was testing software, focused on the automation of tests.
Etwas über 2 Jahre
But then the last a bit more than 2 years, I haven't been doing that
von meiner Arbeitsleistung komplett freigestellt
anymore, but was
bildenden Vertreter
put free from work and was training trainees, was kind of workers' representative for trainers and representing their rights and making sure they have good working conditions. I really enjoyed that,
sehr ehrenamtlich aktiv. Ich war sogar schon
and I'm
Tarifverhandlungen nicht nur auf
I'm doing voluntary work for Verdi, a trade union for
passiert. Das war auch ganz
services. And it was really exciting to see what happens behind the doors. I was helping organize strikes. It's really interesting.
eher weniger, weil
And
ich mit der Bahn
I don't quite like traveling. I have bad luck with the trains.
mag, sind
But what I do like is
Füchse mit den großen Ohren.
are phoenixes.
Wahrscheinlich der ein oder andere
One of my favorite animals, foxes with big ears.
gar nicht mag. Das sind
What I don't like at all are printers. They drive me crazy as an IT person. And
oder Scanner gerne mal lügen.
by latest since the Xerox talk, I've learned that printers or scanners tend to lie. Lying, that's something that nobody likes. Nobody would like to be lied to. That's kind of shit.
Die nicht ganz so cool sind und noch
And I'm coming to some other things that are not cool and even less cool than printer problems.
aber gesagt, ich war sowas
Yeah, I've said that I was
Betriebsrat für
a kind of workers' representative for
Selbstverständlichkeit, dass man sowas in
trainees and junior students, and that's now,
KI-Karma-Vortrag und da habe ich mir
it's not always the case.
und wir machen jetzt
And
so eine
I'd gone to the AI talk and thought of myself as an entrepreneur, and let's do a market analysis. And a question to you, how much is it worth to companies that there's only a pseudo alternative to a works committee?
Bundestag mit der AfD.
It's a bit like how we have it in the national parliament with the alternative for Germany, AfD, which you call an alternative. And who thinks that a company would be willing to pay a 5-digit amount? Quite a few hands. Okay, who thinks that 6-digit figures? Okay, oh, quite a lot of hands still.
dass da noch mehr zu holen ist, dass wir da
Who thinks that there's even more to get here, even millions?
einer sagt schon, er hängt vom Unternehmen ab.
Somebody says that it depends on the company. Okay, that's a good thing to mention. I brought an example.
In einem Fall, das
In one case, where it was checked by the nice people of Corrective Collective, the Hasso-Plattner Institute, an IT research institute,
Euro bezahlt,
they paid 200,000 euros to
Alternative
avoid installing an actual works council with a pseudo alternative.
Anwaltlichen Rat, also
So they first got legal advice. It started like this. Employees wanted to found a works council, which is their good right to do, but the employer didn't like that.
als zu einer Versammlung aufgerufen wurde,
So they called in
und sich ein Anwalt
a meeting, and they had taken down the posters, and they wanted to find out with legal advice what alternatives of co-determination are.
die Idee mit Datenschutz und
The first
funktioniert nicht und hat dann sein Mandat niedergelegt und nichts mehr für die gemacht.
The first representative told them that
Für den Anwalt
that it's not as easy, and the first attorney
eine andere Meinung hat,
dropped their mandate, and then they searched for another
pushing boundaries together.
council,
Bisschen sketchy, der Slogan, aber
which is called Pushing Boundaries Together, which is a kind of a sketchy slogan. And if I were the employer, I would have said, yeah, these are my people. And they said, yes, we can do that. And they thought of something which I call the Institute.
so
council, which pretends to be a works committee but doesn't have the right protections aspects. So they've done lots of hard lobbying inside of the company, so there's no works committee now, but an institute committee. But this doesn't avoid that a works committee could be founded, but then the institute committees couldn't be founded. But yeah, now we have a pure alternative.
And Korrektiv also, in this case, simply asked the German Federal Ministry for Labor, and the ministry responded that they have the conviction that such representations are no useful alternatives to works councils, which is quite a statement, I think. And they added that such activities would be illegal if the founding of a works council was supposed to have been disturbed or prevented in that way. So that would have had to be investigated. And how does that actually work if there are any illegal acts against the founding of a works committee, works council? And the current state of things is that the law for the representative law means that it is necessary for those wanting to have this persecuted to apply for such a prosecution. So the last coalition in their treaty agreed that it should be an offense that requires public prosecution, so that authorities would have to get active in such a case. It would have been great if that would have been possible, but I'm using the word would, and as you know, the coalition broke apart this November, so the law didn't make it into a draft state, and I don't believe, or maybe it did, but I don't think there'll be much about this happening in the German parliament before the next elections. But if you can go and vote, and hopefully do that, then please check the parties, their programs regarding what they say about industrial relations. And one way, of course, would be to go on strike, which, of course, is an economic factor. If, for example, public services would be affected. So again, it would be important for some people to prevent this getting too costly. And if public tenders would be restricted to companies that do not engage in such activities, that would be an economic factor, and tax money would not be used for activities against such activities. Because for me personally, it does feel like an indirect participation in that illegal act if these companies were to receive public commissionings. And what was also quite apparent regarding strikes, you've all felt the strikes that happened to the German railways, and as soon as strikes are getting uncomfortable, some people are calling for fundamental rights to be restricted or infringed. The former General Secretary of the Liberal Party, FDP, for example, called for these strikes to be prevented from taking the whole German economy custody as a victim of this conflict within the railway companies. And someone else said regarding these railway strikes that this is no longer part of a normal industrial relationship or industrial conflict, which the courts saw differently, but a strange kind of understanding of basic rights with politicians, and not just politicians. Sadly, what I noticed, and what I could notice from myself, is that to act in solidarity is always easier if you're not concerned. It becomes more difficult if you can't go anywhere, and that can kind of make you upset, and you lose the kind of understanding of the strike. And this is always emotional, of course, too. If you want to take your children to a nursery which has to close because people can't travel to work there. And in such cases, you should perhaps put yourselves in their shoes and wonder if you wouldn't be wishing for solidarity if you were in that position.
Aber was denn so jenseits der
But
Politik los?
what happens next to politics?
I brought an example by a friend because they wanted to found a youth and worker and trainees representation, shortly JAV, and there are some people who don't like that idea, also students. And somebody said that a works committee is employers association, which is a hot take, but yeah, I think some education still needs to be done there. I don't want to complain about this, but yeah, something must have gone wrong socially. But it's like good that somebody wants to learn something in their education. But I think it's a bad perspective that in a JAV you can't learn something. And also the fear that somebody could be seen as an opponent and it could damage the career. But I would say that in a company where I'm damaging my career if I'm engaged, I don't want to work there maybe. And the wildest statement, not in precise terms, was like in a general sense, in a few years I'll be an executive and maybe a manager, and then it might not matter to me. Many people have that idea, but many people are not good at statistics. I've learned here as well. Okay. After we took a look at the depressing part, what's happening socially, politically, and in certain companies not as well. Let's take a look at what does work. And we want to take a look at different aspects. What does an action need, or what can it bring to be effective? And here we start with an example on which we want to show that emotionality, not in the sense of a great emotional outbreak or something like that, but just the idea of compassion, solidarity, a common goal, target, being affected together, can make people do something or be stronger and advocating for something that they wouldn't do on themselves. That can be on a very big scale, but it can also be a very small thing. For example, when it's raining, going to the stadium of the adversary football game and striking there. Here's an example of Telekom where there were strikes for more pay, for an increase in payment, and we were able to convince the colleagues of Ingenia, who normally, that's what they say about the Erfurt football club, which they don't like as much. They actually went to the stadium and strike there together. So if you're affected in common, you can do a lot with that. Also with creative action. And in this case, the place and the time was very important, because this was at the time of the European football competition, which was this year, which I just noticed with surprise. And the Telekom had the rights to broadcast it. And they were said, yeah, that's cool. We'd like to support it, but only if you treat us appropriately and pay us appropriately. So let's take a look in the stadium and give a warning, just like, hey, join us, please. So this as an example. And another example, considering related to a certain happening. Everybody of you knows Amazon. I don't think I need to explain that in extent. You probably, everybody has heard something about Black Friday. There's a few days in the year where the commerce, where a lot is happening in commerce, lots of stress, also for Amazon, and you can use that. For example, make Amazon pay on such a day where the company has a lot to do, where it's very stressful for workers, and especially on such a day, you can really call people and say that this day is really important, it's really stressful for you, for us. Let's make sure that we're treated properly. So use emotionality, use places and times that fit. Who doesn't know what company is that? Okay, at the first point, I don't see anyone, just a few people who might not be seen. It's TikTok. Who thought that TikTok was for especially good working conditions and fair treatment of the people and the environment? I don't trust you. Okay, it's not the case. In this case, just looking at TikTok Germany, there were complaints about sexism at the workplace, exceeding pressure, just in general not comforting conditions. So they tried to found a works committee, which was obstructed in the first point, and then they cooperated with Verdi, the trade union, and I believe it worked out. And since 2022, they have a works committee, and this shows that with companies where we intuitively already know that they might not be the most employee-friendly, it can even work there, and this can act as a role model. Like you noticed, everybody knows TikTok. At least everybody of you has heard of it already. And this can work as a really great role model and to show here it works. So if it works here, it can work everybody else. So what's really important in all these examples is attention of the public, of the media, and of the employers. That's also a thing by itself. For Amazon, by example, they denied going into collective bargaining, so attention is really central. You can do that with great actions, strikes, demonstrations, protests. You can also use small things. For example, people come up with articles that are just a few cents worth to the counters, to the checkout, and pay it all one by one. And that's bad for the business because it's really costing a lot of work and a lot. And at the same time, lots of people go through the store, fill up the shopping cart, but in the end, strangely, they don't buy it, but there are just lots of shopping carts in the checkout, and they end up blocking the checkout process. And also things like that can be actions that generate attention. There was even a legal trial to check if that's all right. And they decided, yes, of course, with good companionship by trade unions, and you need to be able to see that it's supported by them. You can also read that up. And also small things that collect and sum up can also be used as resistance. And as a small fun fact on the side, this is kind of the category, is this a bug or already a feature? I had been eating breakfast at McDonald's, so there's terminals for ordering instead of people. You can interact with them differently, and I scrolled all the way down where I noticed the article, Nutella for €0 and 0 cents. And I already told that I was at a software testing thing, and I was tried to do that if it's an actual article, and it worked. And I expected there to be an error when I'm paying. There was an error message that it just costs €0. I just had to press OK, got an order number, 204, and it was called up. And that way you can get free Nutella, and you even get a receipt for that.
this as an inspiration the next time you are involved in any industrial dispute with McDonald's or within McDonald's. And I'm not calling for you to just go and eat at McDonald's and create a lot of plastic waste by getting very large numbers of these small packages and having them gifted to you. But events like this, and I don't think I have to tell you this, least of all anyone, but being together is the next item. This is what this Congress is all about, isn't it? And by being together, you can achieve many things and link things with each other, link issues. And maybe you've heard about the case when Fridays for Future linked up with Verdi, the trade union, for a joint strike. You need a working infrastructure for this. You need employees in public transport, in this case, to travel in a future sustainable way. And you then have to consider, do we fit together perhaps? Do we have common issues, even though you might not seem to be a good fit in the first place? And action, just do it, says the slide. These are all examples that have been brought to us, and we would like to issue a call. Just do it. Doing it can happen in all kinds of ways. I was talking about flash mobs in supermarkets, but it can take place in a very traditional way. You are somewhere on a square in Berlin and everyone just drops down dead, for example. It can look like this. These people all were wearing headphones. It was a while ago, so some of them just had their mobiles that they used for receiving instructions on how to behave. So flash mobs are quite easy to organize in this way by being in a video conference together, perhaps. And if you are going to stage flash mobs, then someone is standing in front of it and is saying, oh, well, there's someone lying on the ground there. That is strange, but they're all lying on the ground. It's not going to be something very bad. Well, I'll just move off and go my own way. And therefore, it is quite important to also say, what is this about? When you create awareness, you should avoid people not knowing what it is all about. So bring posters, banners, be loud, and so on. Something else that creates awareness was a different action. The slide says join up. And this was at an event of the right extremist AfD party in Germany. And the remark came from the audience that was a cool event, a cool action. Thank you. So there was this alliance, form alliances, says the slide. And this one's the slide Essen Resists, the city of Essen in Germany. This included the Deutsche Gewerkschaftsbund, the Trade Unions Congress in Germany. And this comes with the suggestion that you should find allies. It was very practical that using structures of the Verdi trade union, we were able to reach people that were politically active, and being politically active in trade union circles includes being anti-fascist. So these people were quite keen to disturb the AfD, and that saved a lot of work regarding the work to reach people. And an AfD delegate found themselves motivated to bite someone in the leg. So it seemed to have been quite a successful thing. And there are so many ways of turning into actions. You could spread fake cash and tell them, if you want real cash, why don't you join this group? Or you can have poster actions. You can have a slowdown strike. But how can you actually get those ideas together? And there is a method that you may know, some of you, where you sit down in a circle and everyone just writes down a few ideas, even if they might think they have none at the time. It it almost always works. You then pass the papers around on to the next person. The next person can use the ideas on the paper and write down a few more. And before I describe this at length, I'm going to tell you the name of this method. It is 635. And this, when I've used it to get some ideas, it always worked fantastically well. And one last hint from me. You can do a lot digitally, of course. So the slide says, just do it digitally. You can run a digital strike. I couldn't get all the info into this talk, but just a small hint. Today, there's going to be a self-organized session called Leftist Person Seeks Nerd. So it was about getting people that have politically motivated ideas, action ideas, to link up with technically minded people. Don't be too hard on the people that run this session. I think it's the first one that they actually have organized. And now we're going to move back. And to the conclusion, what would we like you to take away from this talk? And that is just the appeal to get active, even if at first you don't quite succeed. Just stand up again, try again, find allies and try again. Just a very practical example, when we submitted our talk, we had no idea whether we would manage to actually get to the stage. It worked, obviously. So just as an appeal, just do it, try, and if you need ideas or motivation from us, this presenter really doesn't like me, we have our contact data here. If you don't recognize the symbols immediately, the first one is Signal, the second is Telegram. In my case, you can also send me an encrypted email. I think you'd best search for the fingerprint, not the email, because a mishap happened to me, but this is the right key. Thanks for the applause. If you have questions anyway, you can ask them now. There is a bit of time left too.
Your appeal reminds me of, well, actually, it's the founding paper of the Chaos Computer Club, Do Something, Tu wat, which was there in the beginning of the 80s. And then after a few years, we had the Congress, Tu wat, Do Something. In this case, you already do something, and you're already here. So let's start with them, please. Okay, yeah, you already heard me scream and shout and celebrate. If you notice, first point, there's no reason not to join a trade union. I happen to be at Verdi at this by coincidence, but it's still worth it for IG Metall and wherever you're associated with. It just costs 1% of your wage, and there's lots of advice, legal advice. There's no reason not to join them. And the pay with 1% of your wage is quite fair, and you end up earning more with your collective bargaining or industrial action. You end up earning more again and paying more. First, why trade unions are so important. It's no coincidence that in authoritarian systems, trade unions are first abolished. Okay, thank you very much. Let's continue here. Thanks for the talk. When I work at a company where there's no person organized and no works committee, how do you start organizing people? Okay. Reach out to your trade union, to your local trade union. It might know its way around best. But it's a lot of calling their attention to that. It's important that they are affected, why it's relevant and important, what it's for. And I notice it as a kind of welfare problem. if in a company and union busting happens like that, a premium are paid if there's like a premium that can work against people joining trade unions. So get help from your local trade union, no matter which one it may be. The people have experience, and when in doubt, they might have already heard of your company, and maybe somebody else reached out to them before from your company. And then you can start organizing and convincing and show that, hey, look, you're also affected by this. So that's like should be the normal thing that you can work together. And just one additional note, in your own team, maybe look around if somebody else would be interested in it and might want to help you start something. It has a lot to do with group dynamics as well. Once you just started to convince 2 or 3 people, so focus on the ones who are already positively associated, then it's easier to continue. Something from the internet? There's a head shake. Okay, let's continue with the one. Well, thanks for your talk. I myself work at the German Trade Union Council. 2 notes in North Rhine-Westphalia. On the 2nd of January, there's the General Assembly of the Alternative for Germany, and we do picket, and everybody who wants to come by. And furthermore, from the Trade Union Council, you can get brochures. You're warmly welcome to look through that. Make lots of orders. The website is dgb.de. Okay, thank you very much for the really important talk. Also here. And by coincidence, I end up being a Verdi member as well. I also founded a works committee some time ago. And what I can say about this is that, especially as a developer, it's really important also in the smaller companies to be engaged. Lots of people are really nice to each other and are friends to each other, give benefits. But if you're coming into a tough time, it may flip very radically. And I noticed that time and time again. And at some time, I joined in. Verdi supported a lot. And I wanted to think about it. Thank you for it. We try to pass it on. And maybe you remember the talk this night from Katharina Notuk. You need to use positive feelings to work against negative things like workers' unions. This was a joke, but this is being done lots of times. There's only so much given that the motivation isn't high enough to get over the obstacle and be engaged. But in the end, it ends up being really important anyways. Okay, 2 minutes remain. Just another note. Considering talk to your local trade union, but trade unions are not equal. Especially reach out to the DGB in place. Verdi, IG Metall, NGG, you can find at the place. Just a few experience. I'm in public service, and there's lots of trade unions of German public officials, and they only require 0.5% of your income, but they don't do actual political work. Everybody's just there and thinking, well, we're trade union oriented, but they don't do things, maybe just for a small group of people, but not for the whole company. GGP.
Thank you. That was a very important remark. There are other trade unions that are kind of on the right side of the political spectrum. Additional info from this interpreter, this was about some trade unions being organized in the DGB, the Trade Unions Council, which is the corresponding British term, and other trade unions are organized in other associations, and they have a different political course. Okay. I am actually a company owner, but as soon as we've reached a certain size, I am going to support the foundation of a works committee, works council. Have a good time also at Congress. Take your rubbish with you. And Zecke meets nerd. Tick means nerd, literally translated, but left.